Welcome back to the JLL Coaching Pod, episode 33. We're making moves. Let's go. I truly believe that when the petrol/gas tank is fully empty, if you play good music, loud, you've still got 50 miles in the tank. That is a Hunter S. Thompson quote that gets me going. I absolutely love that quote. I love tunes, I love music, and it's a great example of how stories hit you harder than facts. And I believe that. It's crazy. There's no logic there. It's irrational, but the car's empty, no fuel. But if you've got the goddamn tunes going, it doesn't matter. You can keep driving. Yeah, that gets me pumped up. Movement quality and risk management. So I post a lot of content on the gram. If you're not following, follow. And one of my mates popped up in the DMs. He was like, bro, are you not worried about your shoulders? Do you get some shoulder discomfort when you're bench pressing? Because some of my sets, some of my reps, my shoulders will flare out to about that 90-degree angle when talking about the humerus relative to the rib cage, which is basically that big bone in the arm, being about 90 degrees out, or maybe sometimes further, as opposed to a fixed 45 degrees. I think that's what we were saying. We didn't actually dive directly into the degrees, but effectively he was like, do you get discomfort from benching like that? I have in the past. Is that an issue? Is that something you think about? And that kind of got me going. It got me thinking, and we had a great discussion. If you have any questions ever, just slide in the DMs. And I think a part of me at one point would really care about the path that the arm takes during a bench press. And some way smarter than me people in the industry, like Kasim with N1 Education, I think he would be biased towards having that pretty fixed sometimes. And the kind of debate is, if you can keep your arm path in that fixed 45-ish degrees, you reduce the risk of injury. And I think that's personally oversimplified. We also had a discussion this week within the team about jumping and the knees coming in, knee valgus effectively, which is when your hips internally rotate and your tibia externally rotates relatively. So it looks like your knees are falling in, collapsing in towards each other, which is knee valgus, which has got a lot of hate, and some people are worried about it. Personally, I'm not. And it's a kind of on these similar lines, all talking about movement quality and the strategies that our bodies try and adapt to manage the situation they are in. And for me, this entire conversation, it just goes back to, why do we train? Sipping a little coffee. Went out for a really good dinner last night with my dad. Little birthday treat. It's my birthday soon, so yeah, shout out to me. 28 years old soon. Big 28. Went to a French restaurant, got a good fancy black pudding with some mashed potatoes and a nice little mustardy sauce. Mustard in a sauce elevates the absolute tits off of everything. That was banging. That was the best. A good bit of rabbit as well, like actually rabbit, which was nice. Anyway, had a good dinner, and I'm sipping a delicious coffee this morning. I'm making my coffees with less milk. Why? Because it just gets me going. If I've got a good coffee, I'll do that. If I don't enjoy the coffee, I will just latte it up to the teas. But that's a great little cough I'm having there. So movement quality, risk management, and why do we train? So all of this conversation about the strategies our body use to manage forces, it's a very complicated conversation. But it all stems back to gravity and, again, how our body manages gravity, how our body manages forces during different movements. And leading on from that, why do we train? Now, I think outside of the subjective experience of our clients and ourselves with regards to well-being, enjoyment, all of these things, we train to drive adaptations. We are looking for outcomes. We aren't generally just training to have a nice time, although that does become part of the process. We are training for adaptations. We are training for outcomes. That could be building muscle, getting stronger, faster, fitter, better at running, better at swimming. It could be anything. We are looking for performance outcomes. And that comes first after the subjective experience. Generally, you have to be having a pretty good time. Generally. Some people don't care about that and they can just be disciplined through it, but I don't think that lasts long enough. You have to be having a good time. So adherence is number one, so you can continue to drive these adaptations. So really it goes back. Adaptations, outcomes is why we train. That's what we're training for, to develop, to change something, to get better. And to drive any adaptation, any physical adaptation, the number one thing is you have to overload your current system. You have to push it to the limit of where it currently is in order to drive some kind of change or stimulus. It's like this. If you get given £5,000 a month, would you go and work? Potentially, but you would have to think about it. You have no reason to change. You just could sit home and watch Netflix all day. There's a conversation about universal basic income. If everyone got X amount of pounds per month, would you be less incentivized to go and work? Now, I'll use this as an example because I would suggest there would be a few people who would not go and work, who they would not change because they are in that comfort zone and they will not. They do not need to change their behaviors to get the desired outcome. They are in that place where they have the desired outcome and they are happy. Same thing goes with training. If you have everything that you want, you do not need to train to cause an adaptation to change. So you're training to cause an outcome. You're training to cause a stimulus and drive adaptation. In order to do that, you need to overload or stimulate where you currently are. You need to push to earn more money so you can do things that you want to do with that money. That's the kind of storyline I've just thought up. I hope it makes sense. I'm sure it does. You can figure that out. There is no way you can't. So in order to drive these adaptations and these stimuli, training needs to be difficult. Naturally, when you're talking about overloading something, it can't be staying the same. It has to be, we are pushing to challenge what you currently are, what you currently have, in order to adapt and grow over time. Within there, there is room for error, in my opinion. So we will really focus on the bench press because I think everyone loves a bench press. Who doesn't love a bench press? And you can look on my Instagram to see what he's talking about. There's videos there of me benching, and some of them my elbows are in a variety of different positions. My arm path is in a variety of different positions throughout the bench press. And for me, that is not a problem at all. And what I base that on is the main driving thing. Am I getting stronger? Am I developing tissue? Objectively, those two answers are yes. The adaptation that I'm looking for are coming. I'm getting my number one target. Along that path to adaptation, injuries happen. This is the risk management. This is the conversation about bar paths that the bones take, how to manage forces, risk management. Now, pain is a huge indicator that your body's going to give you that something is up. If you have zero pain and you are making progress in the targeted area that you want to make progress in, and you aren't experiencing any pain, it does not matter how, if your knees come in, it does not matter if your bones are in a position that someone's not happy about, it does not matter. It does not matter. You can train like that forever and have zero problems. And there will be hundreds of people who do that. As soon as there is pain, and pain, it's a moment to pause and say, okay, pain in this example of finances, universal basic income, you're getting that 5,000. Pain would be the government suggesting that we are no longer going to give this 5,000 anymore. And that should give you a moment to pause and think and make a decision. Now, sometimes pain is bullshit. Pain is all in our brain. That's where we kind of have the subjective experience of pain. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have an issue in your body. A few great examples of this are phantom limb pain. So you can have your arm removed and you can you have no arm, there's no physical arm attached to your body, but you can still have pain in that arm that is no longer there. That is a great example of how complicated pain is. It's a signal that we need to make decisions based off. So for example, in that situation, you've got no limb and you've got pain where that limb is supposed to be. Can you do anything about that? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You can try and be rational. You can speak to someone about it, and I'm sure there are processes to help manage that pain. Another great example is people with knee pain. They did studies where they put people through knee surgery, where it was a placebo test. They basically, in reality, just opened up their knee a little bit, cut into it, did zero to change any tissues, ligaments, tendons, did nothing to change the quality or positions of bones, ligaments, anything like that. They just opened the knee and closed it again and asked the patients about their subjective experience of pain. And there was positive evidence that their experiences of pain improved. What does this show? Pain is very complex. It is a warning signal. When you're driving, it is that engine light turning on, and you've got to make a decision how you want to deal with that. This is why it gets quite complicated, because if you're driving good outcomes, you're getting good adaptations, and there is no pain, you should generally keep going. That's generally fine to keep going. If that's what you're training for, that's awesome, and I wouldn't worry about this. If pain then pops up, you need to start having a conversation about it. And there's different types of pain and to respond and things like that. But for me, the last thing of an injury is always managing the psychological side. Always. Can I go back in and do that same exercise that hurt me before and push hard and kind of go back to driving adaptations and outcomes without psychologically holding myself back? So when you do get pain and you're trying to drive these adaptations, that is when you probably want to start making changes. Potentially. It might be something like, I feel this for one set, next set is fine. And that is so common, and why it's so important to not read into too much what this signal is telling you, unless it's like a long form period of pain. And then you need to make more and more changes. To go back to this topic about movement quality, and what does movement quality mean? So every tissue in our body has a job with regards to the bones and joints that it moves. The pecs are used to adduct, internally rotate, extend the arm. That's a huge job of the pec. That's what it's theorized to do, but naturally it will do a load of other things in the body with regards to moving, stabilizing, controlling different bones and joints. it is theorized that the humerus needs to be at about 45 degrees to bias the majority of the pec fibers. Muscle tissue is big. It covers a big amount of space and it does a bunch of jobs. You can see the way the fibers run, and generally that's the bar path that you want to drive with particular exercises for those particular tissues. However, if the humerus is in a slightly different position, generally you're just going to bias a different part of that tissue. And if the outcome you're looking for is to get stronger and build muscle, it's not the end of the world, unless you are looking to develop a very small segment or bias a particular part of a tissue. Then it starts to become a really important conversation about where the position of your bones are. If you're just trying to generally develop an area, it's not important. You can just kind of tick a few boxes, set up a few constraints so it looks like a bench press still, or it looks like a squat still, if that's the target thing you're trying to improve. And within those constraints, you'll be fine. The best bench pressers I work with, I know, all have a slightly different bar path. And that will be based upon the structure of your skeleton and 100 different factors where your body's learnt to move. So one thing I've spoken about before is variability. And within movement quality, people talk about movement quality as like a rep should look a certain way. In reality, no rep will ever look the same as any other rep, because it will slightly be off in some kind of way. You can't swing a tennis racket the exact same way twice, because things change and the universe is complicated and it's impossible to make it the same twice. It's just not possible. Therefore, the body needs to learn how to move and have success with these outcomes in a variety of patterns within these certain constraints. So when you're bench pressing, particularly if you're new, you might need to be a bit more strict with your form. You might want to just be as strict as possible. Reps have to look like this. And even within that realm, you'll have a lot of variability. But the best bench pressers in the world, the best movers in the world, will have a billion problems, a billion ways to solve a problem. Bruce Lee talked about, I'm not afraid of the man who's thrown 10,000 different kicks. I'm afraid of the man who's thrown one kick 10,000 times. This is what this conversation is about with regards to movement quality. You want to attempt to do the same rep. It will look slightly differently. The start and end point will probably be the same, but the path along the way will be slightly different, and that's the variability in training. The more experienced you are, the bigger the variability will be with regards to that bar path, that movement. As you have more experience, you have more kind of motor competencies, movement competencies around different movement patterns. Therefore, you can achieve the task in a bigger variety of ways. If you look at blacksmiths and how they hit, say they're building a sword. We're in the Middle Ages. We're developing some cool swords. You got to bang it with a hammer, get the metal thinner, more dense, bang, bang, bang. If you look at the path that this hammer takes, it's always different. But if you look at the spot that they're hitting, it's always the same. This is an example of an expert who's done 10,000 hours developing variability in their skill, in their task at hand. That is good, high level of movement quality. If you are a new blacksmith, you might do the same path and have a lower level of accuracy because you don't have that motor competency yet. That movement quality yet hasn't been driven into your system. Therefore, you're not as competent at completing the task. So the better you get at things, the more room for error you have for still completing the task and driving those outcomes. In the Olympics, you can watch the Olympic lifting. There is such a big variability with how those lifts look. All of them are walking into the unknown and breaking world records. Things don't have to look a certain way to drive progress. They do have to look a certain way. They don't have to look identical to drive progress. It's a big thought of mine that generally the way our body manages ourselves and movement is a too complicated task to be conscious about when performing and driving overload. We can always perform well. We can always perform well when things are controlled. That is okay. Okay to do. When things are controlled, we can always generally perform well, and we're not pushing the limits. If you're just like, everyone always teaches people how to Olympic lift with like an empty bar. As soon as you add weights to that bar, everything changes. You need to learn how to do things with how you're going to perform. Of course, start light, build up naturally. That's common sense. But you need to train in a way that causes adaptation and actually develops the skill that you want to achieve. If you are always working at 50%, you will never improve your 100%. I say never. It's a lower likelihood of improving your 100%. So movement quality, with regards to how pretty exercises look or the outcomes, the executions, for me, comes further down the list of priorities compared to overloading the system. You need to train with this intensity, this intent to drive adaptation, and that comes first rather than making things look super pretty. Why? Because there's going to be variability. The body will figure it out, and if you're not experiencing pain, there is not a warning signal. You can keep going and keep driving these adaptations. Big chat. I hope you got some value from this. Thank you very much for listening. And please dive in the comments or in the DMs, because it really helps me figure out these topics. And this is something that I'm very open to change my mind on. And I think people smarter than me that I learn from would probably have a different opinion on a lot of this stuff. A big thing, the last thing I would say is you do want initially with newbies stuff to look really high quality. Quality is a huge metric to follow, and that's subjective as well as objective with the bar path. If you've got better equipment, you can make it more objective. But the easiest way to do that and set people who are figuring out skills or movement patterns up for success is add constraints. Add constraints, put them on machines, add stability, add ground, and allow them to have a big amount of success. Then as things get more complex, they get more competent, you can remove stability, ground, and get them to do different exercises that will drive different outcomes. I'm going to leave this one there. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you have a great day, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.